Hey, it's Rod Yates. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode, I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey, and the lessons they've learned. And my guest for the next hour is Grammy-nominated producer, mixer, engineer, and songwriter Chris Messina. Chris's Grammy nominations came off the back of his work with Bon Iver. They struck up a friendship when Chris was working on Bon Iver's world tour in support of his second album, and after that run, Mr. Bon Iver himself, Justin Vernon, asked Chris to quit working on the touring circuit and move to Wisconsin to manage his studio and collaborate on music. Chris did just that and played a key role in the making of the last two Bon Iver albums, 22 A Million and I. Before bunkering down with Bon Iver though, Chris was touring the world, working behind the scenes with artists like Madonna, Tom Jones and Lady Gaga, all of which we talk about in this interview. But we started right back at the beginning with Chris's upbringing and his unconventional path into the business.
Yeah, so I grew up just in Euclid, Ohio, which is basically like the next city over from Cleveland going east. And I lived there until I was 18, and I started touring with a sound company that is based in Cleveland. It just so happened that they were like the second largest sound company in the world at the time. But up until then, I just, my dad is a musician and a dentist. But, he
That's a great
certainly
combo.
His website is like rockindoc.com or something. He definitely tried to do musician for a long time, and then, had some kids and was like, I got to get this together. And so he became a dentist. But so like it was like music and the technical side of it were always kind of in my world. My dad had a TIAC 4-track, which I now have. And he was always kind of the band leader for his band musically, as well as kind of driving them technically, building lighting rigs and stuff for them.
Right.
And, the first time I got electrocuted was building their like lighting rig in my grandma's garage.
When you say the first time, does that suggest there have been many times?
There have been many, only a couple of note, but the first one, and there was another one. Well, we don't need to get into them, but yeah, the first of many, but the only one of note. But yeah, so that part of the world, or like the industry or whatever, was like in me from a very young age. And my sister as well. Like when my sister was born, she's 6 years older than me, but like my dad was still traveling around with his band, and she was like living in the van and stuff for the first couple of years of her life.
Right.
So it's just, it's in us, and it's not like he was ever directly teaching me. He's a guitar player. I was a drummer mostly, and his twin brother, who they were in bands together, he's the drummer side of it. So it wasn't like he was teaching me a lot about music, but I was just around it all the time and was, again, around the technical side of it. So it all just kind of, it felt natural to me from a pretty young age, just like, oh, I'm probably going to be doing this.
Right.
I was in a punk band in third grade, and really cool music teacher, Mrs. Monarchino, shout out if you're out there, that let us play like in the auditorium, a bunch of third graders. It was nuts. She let us like bring our gear in and play a horrible punk song called Mr. Rogers Plays in a Band. And then there's another one that we had to change the lyrics to. It was called Kill All the Kids. I think we changed it to, I don't know, Save All the Kids or something, just for that show. We had to clean it up. Censorship, man.
Wow. The spirit was in you very early. The punk rock spirit.
Yeah, it might help that my sister was 6 years older, and she like started hanging around with skaters and that whole scene. So like, I don't know. I was exposed to cool stuff pretty early on, and I just latched on, and then it was just full speed ahead bands, and I thought I was going to be a rock star and all that. And then the band broke up in high school, and I had to figure something else out. Oh,
so it was that even in high school, it was that young that you decided that, okay, maybe there is a path other than trying to be a rock star?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it came so naturally because I was doing all of that at the same time. I was doing live sound already in high school through my high school, and then I also worked for like a sort of mid-sized sound company based in Cleveland that would do like high school theater productions, but pretty high production value high school theater. So I was getting to mix, obviously not Broadway level productions or whatever, but, it was full automation, and we were running sound effects, automated sound effects. And it was, 25 wireless mics and a full pit band and all that kind of stuff. So I was fortunate enough pretty early on to be exposed to kind of what the actual industry was like.
Right.
And, you know, I like being in a band as much as the next guy that is in bands or next gal that's in bands. But like, I maybe just at the time was like, I like doing this more, or this is more right in front of me. I'm going to go do this. And then, you know, I went to college for a minute and I dropped out after a year and started touring full time with this sound company. It just kind of snowballed.
Yeah.
Before I knew it, I was gone 11 months out of the year, and I was doing stadium tours with, you know, Lady Gaga or whatever. So it's like, it just became something that I was very good at and into and music adjacent. So it was just like, this is great.
What do you think drew you to it though? Even as at a young age, was it just seeing your father doing it? Did that lend it an air of, I don't know if legitimacy is the right word, but it was a way of connection with your father? Or did you just feel the music inside you, for lack of a perhaps a cliche?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a way of connecting. You know, my parents broke up when I was 6, and it's not like either of them ditched out of the picture or anything. They're still very much part of my life. It's great. But to this day, you know, my dad and I will hang out, and it's 20 minutes of pleasantries, and then it's like, so how's your amp? I bought him a new amp a couple months ago, and it's just like he took it out on its first gig because he still plays in a band.
Right.
The same band that he's been in the whole time. It's like the same group of dudes for 40 years or something.
Amazing.
More than that, actually, because I think they started before high school, but whatever. You know, he took it out on its first gig last weekend, and he's kind of giving me the report, and it translated like this. So it's like, it's very much a way that we talk about, that we connect and communicate. We'll talk about gear and music before a lot of things, you know, for better or worse.
Sure.
But that's our thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure that had something to do with it. And then it didn't hurt that I was good at it. I think very early on, again, I had a really cool music teacher in like 4th or 5th grade that even just at the choir concerts or you know, with 3 microphones or something, he let me be in charge of that. And I didn't blow anything up, and it wasn't too loud, and nothing fed back. And it was just kind of like, I recognized that I was good at this from a pretty early point.
Yeah.
So I found that, and I latched onto it for sure.
And you mentioned that your parents divorced. Was your mom also interested in music? Was she involved in music?
No, she does. She doesn't play, or I think actually, I think she has a songwriting credit on a Phil Keaggy song. For that one of a poem she wrote, Phil wrote a song, you know, turned into a song. So
right.
She's in the biz.
Okay.
But now she loves music and was very supportive. But you know, we weren't starting a family band anytime soon.
Right. Okay. And you made it sound very logical, that progression up to working for that professional sound company in Cleveland. But were there other steps that you had to do to get that? Or did you have to work in the clubs? I mean, did you have other interests that you were at some point looking to pursue?
I really didn't. You know, like I said, I started with them at 18, and I was already working in the industry at some level. So there wasn't a lot of time for me to kind of goof around and figure stuff out. It went from being like, oh, I'm doing a high school musical, to, you know, a couple months later, I was on tour with Tom Jones, and it was like, it got very real very fast.
Right.
And that was the people at the company, the owner, Tom Arco, and the rest of his team there saw something in me, you know, aside from cheap labor as a new kid who interned and worked for free for a long time and then went out on the road for nothing just because I was hyped. Right. But they saw something in me and surrounded me with the right people, other engineers and technicians on these tours that were able to mold me from that stage. I've had to talk about this, not a lot or a little bit, but just some lately, about how non-traditional my path has been and how I'm very thankful for that. And that's not to say that I didn't work my ass off to do it all, because I like to think of myself as the kind of the hardest working person in the room. But it was a very non-traditional path, and things really lined up, and a lot of luck and a tiny bit of skill, and it really just took off. Yeah, being put in that position so early on and surrounded with people that were showing me the right way to do it, I just didn't have to go, you know, slog it out in the clubs or anything. It was just, I was learning at a higher level.
Yeah. So can you even quantify some of the things you learn on that initial tour? You go out with Tom Jones. Like, in what capacity were you there, and what do you remember of learning? What lessons did you learn that stick with you to this day? So I dropped out of college.
on my way driving back to my mom's house from my dorm, I got a call from the company and they were just like, hey, we haven't heard from you in a little while. Where you been? And they were just like, well, you leave in the morning. And I was just like, what? And they're like, yeah, you're going to Houston. You're starting this Tom Jones tour, blah, blah, blah. So I left. I was 18. I was broke. You know, I probably had $100 or something in my bank account after college. And I went out there. And I kind of got a week or two into the thing. And I still hadn't gotten paid because it's a paycheck rollover thing. So I was just I had no money for, 2 or 3 weeks out there. And Tom Jones, front of house guy, and his monitor guy saw that and, just fronted me a bunch of cash and just gave me an advance on per diem and stuff like that. So that was something that stuck with me in my time moving throughout the company, was just, be really nice to people when you can. And I probably don't always adhere to that. I'll be the first to say that, but that's something that is that's not industry or technical based or anything like that. But that's something that really stuck with me, that those guys didn't have to do that. They could have just been like, look at this idiot. He doesn't have any money and he's on the road and he can wait till he gets paid or gets his per diem or whatever. So that stuck with me a lot. And it was a small crew. It was a lot of dudes that had been working together for a long time, and they were just nice and it was a well-oiled machine. So it would have been pretty hard for me to screw it up. And that's why it was a great place to learn. But so that's one of the things I took away. But, technically speaking, there were a million things. Everything was at a whole other level. It was all brand new. And I was learning it, whether it's, when you're loading in, you put your power down first and you put your signal down after that, because that's how it goes away at the end of the night. I was learning how to tour and how, I got really good at loading a truck and, managing cable and just that kind of stuff. And that's where you have to start. Anybody who skips those steps is going to be worse for it down the line. So those are the kinds of things, the practical things that I took away from that experience. Yeah.
What about the hours? Like, I'm always conscious of when you go to a gig, there have been crew guys or girls there since early morning, and they're going to be there well after we have left. Like, what is that lifestyle like?
It's certainly a young person's game. I couldn't, I'm only 35 or something. 35? I'm 35, I think. And I can't even fathom doing the stuff that I used to do anymore. And I got a lot of friends that are still do it. And I just go, man, I don't know how you're doing it. But, they're nuts. Like, for those earlier tours or kind of mid-level tours, it's much more forgiving. You're in at 7 or 8 in the morning and, you're kind of done for the day around 3 and you can kind of hang out till showtime or something like that. And then you got to load out and you'll be done at midnight or 1 or something. And you do it all again. But where it gets really gnarly is my first really big tour was Madonna, and it was 2008 or 9. And I was the RF technician. It was all stadiums worldwide. It was like a 9-month tour or something.
What is RF technician? What does that mean?
Oh, all the wireless mics and in-ear monitors and guitars and stuff. Okay. I coordinated all those frequencies every day and made sure we weren't going to have any issues. Very nerve-wracking in 2008. Much less nerve-wracking now. It was like the Wild West then. And, whatever. I can gripe about it as an old man or something. But that was the first taste of this is nuts. We did 65 days, literally without a day off. We were flying on charter flights, so it was just flight straight to load in, work through the night, do the show the next day, back on a plane to the next load. It was just like that for 2 months straight or something. And that's where it got really gnarly. It's like, you're loading in at 3 or 4 in the morning, or you're doing overnight load-ins. That was my first taste of that. And that's the kind of thing that I'm like, I could never do that again. Ever. Yeah. I would never do that. And, physically probably couldn't, even though I'd like to think I could, but... Yeah, so the hours can get nuts, and it's just, then you get into festivals and stuff where you're, again, doing these overnight load-ins because you got to start after the last band finishes the night before, just all that kind of stuff. It's an insane thing.
How do you deal with the pressure of that? You mentioned being in charge of those wireless systems, and particularly for an artist like Madonna, who is obviously renowned for being very precise and is someone who's been at the top of the game for a long, long time.
Yeah.
How do you, when you're doing that day after day after day after day, how do you cope with the stress and the pressure? What mechanisms do you develop?
I used to drink a lot, but I don't anymore. But that used to certainly be a way to deal with it all, and that was a way a lot of us out there do it. But outside of that, I had a really great team around me. There was a Madonna's front of house engineer at the time, a guy named Tim Colvard, fantastic engineer, and just a really great guy that from very early on at my time at Eighth Day, which was the sound company I was working for, he again saw something in me and said, all right, I'm going to show this kid what's up. And he was really good about that with a couple of us. And the couple of us that he did kind of guide have all done very well in the industry and are continuing to do so. So I think he had a lot to do with that. But he was a very calming force on that tour. He was certainly our leader. And he didn't have to be, because a lot of front of house guys can just show up right before the show and do the show and split and be jerks and make money and whatever. But he was not that. And he taught me a lot of things, again, not just technically. He was the guy that taught me how to take care of my money and just a lot of things like that, life things that maybe somebody's not teaching you when you're 19 or 20 years old. But he was he was kind of the driving factor out there that was just like, it's going to be fine. We're going to get through it. We have our spares, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I had one or two disasters on that tour. One was in Chicago. Her mic turned off and the noise floor of whatever else was on the frequency blasted through. And I thought for sure, I was like, well, this is it. I'm going home. That's the end of this run.
Yeah.
And Tim, like, very calmly was just like, all right, what happened? I'll deal with it. Don't let it happen again. And that kind of attitude makes me just go, okay, well, I'm definitely not letting it happen. It's never going to happen again now.
Right.
Because you just feel like you got away with it or something. That was your pass. And so that's the team. That's always it for me. I'm probably a lone wolf or something more than I should be, but the team is always when things are operating the best, and that's how you keep everybody level and make it all happen.
And is that team as well, is that responsible for you to even feel like you belong in that environment?
I mean, sure. I'm sure that helps. I'm sure that plays into it. I've been doing this my entire adult life, and I don't really worry about that anymore. More often than not, again, when I'm in a room of people that do this, I have more or as much experience in the industry as people a lot older than me, and that gives me a certain amount of confidence that I can exist with those people and feel comfortable in a lot of those roles, which, that just comes with time and experience. That's, I'm sure if I was doing this when I was 20, I would have been like, I don't know how I got here. I hope they give me a flight soon so I can go home. I'm tired.
So last question about that period of your career, but seeing artists like Madonna and Lady Gaga and Tom Jones and what they do night after night, what did you observe of these artists and how they stay where they are at the top of the game?
Well, I mean, again, it's a team. Madonna's a perfect example. She generally doesn't ask anybody to do anything that she's not willing to do, and I think that that's a lot of the time really a key quality in a leader. And that's, again, as the artist, feels like maybe less so now these days that the artist is leading the charge as much. There's kind of more of a team already that's kind of generating the thing. But with someone like Madonna, she is that's where the buck stops. So that's something I take away is just, if you're going to ask people to do some gnarly stuff, then you better be out there working as hard as everybody else. If you're going to ask everybody to stay overnight to fix a set piece or whatever that you want that isn't working how you want, then you better come in tomorrow and rehearse your ass off on that thing. And she does. She'll do that day in and day out. And I think that is the sign of somebody that knows what's going on and is going to be around for a minute. There aren't a lot of people that I think kind of get to slack off and are going to have a 30, 40-year career.
We'll be back with more from Chris after this short break. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with Chris Messina. So one of the key tours that you did was with Bon Iver. What role were you on that tour? Were you doing front of house?
No. So at that point, that tour changed everything for me on a number of levels. But so a friend of mine was doing front of house for them. His name's Brian Joseph, and he and I had toured together with the Fray years prior. And he was doing monitors for them, and I was his monitor tech. And kind of since then, we had become fast friends. and we're kind of trying to find a way to work together. But Brian had started working with Bon Iver pretty early on, but I had kind of, I was doing these Madonna tours and these huge stadiums and stuff, and the way the company operated is that I was like I was now like an A-level engineer or technician. There isn't a lot. Basically, I've just got bigger stuff to do. I couldn't go do this cool indie tour that I would have fun. They needed me to be doing these giant tours. So Brian and I were trying to find a way to do it, and it just, nothing ever really lined up. And when the second Bon Iver record was getting ready to come out, or they kind of realized, all right, it's going to blow up. It's going to get a lot bigger. We're going to be able to carry production. Reached out to 8th Day, reached out to me to see if I would be able to do it. And I actually wasn't, because I was supposed to go do a Lil Wayne tour. I had worked with him a lot over the years, so I was doing this, had this Lil Wayne tour scheduled. But what ended up happening was Beyonce got pregnant and had to cancel her tour. So a bunch of these other A-level guys were able to come and do this Lil Wayne tour now. And again, Tom Marco at 8th Day said to me, listen, if you really want to go do this Bon Iver tour, like, you've earned it, you can go do it if you want. So I said, awesome. I'm in. And I was the only guy on the tour. I was the only audio guy on the tour. They had their engineers, front of house and a monitor guy. But I was the tech, and that was everything. So I was wiring the stage, I was doing PA, I was taking care of the engineers and everything. And this was with a band that had not toured at this level yet and weren't really sure how to do it. So there was very quickly became a lot more, my role became a lot more, I don't know, intense, or I just had a lot more to do kind of on this to make it happen. And I think that was noticed very early on by Justin, because I could have just shown up if I didn't like the band or like the guys and all that stuff and just done what I think was my job and back away and let everybody else deal with it. But I kind of I did a lot more, and I didn't mind, and I was really excited to be doing it. So that was really it. I mean, once I started working for Bon Iver, I only did maybe one or two other gigs that were not Bon Iver for 8th Day after that.
Right. Why do you think? Like, what level did you mentioned Justin Vernon, who is effectively Bon Iver. What level did you connect with him? Was there something there that made him be the person that you always wanted to work with?
I mean, I just love the music. I mean, it's undeniable that the first record, and I had heard the second record at this point. I heard it like the day it was mastered. Brian stopped by I was living in New York at the time. They did it at Sterling. Brian came over and played me the record, and I was just like, holy shit, this is nuts. And, I was excited to be working with Brian again, because he and I hadn't worked together in a few years, and it just all felt right. All my friends liked the band. It was just like, oh, this is kind of the first cool thing that I'm doing. Everything else has been nuts, Right. But my friends don't listen to Madonna. My friends don't listen to Gaga or whatever. And I'm doing all these nuts tours, and people come out to the shows just to hang out with me, but they're like, yeah, I would never go see this. Right. Now I'm working for this band that everybody's like, can I come see that? That's like my favorite thing, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure that played into it. But again, Justin, I think, saw something in me that I wasn't angling for at all. We just hit it off, and I was doing one of those few non-Bon Iver gigs that I did in the next few years. I was doing Beyonce at the Roseland Ballroom for a DVD shoot or something. And I had a little break, and Justin called me and was just like, hey, so I don't really know how this is going to work. And, it's probably going to be like a huge pay cut for you, but I think you should move to Wisconsin and run my studio.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, okay. And like, that was pretty much it. Like, my lease was, I was living with my girlfriend, my now wife at the time in Brooklyn, and our lease was up, and we were kind of figuring out what we were going to do. She tours as well, so neither of us really needed to be in New York. And we kind of thought, all right, this is a pretty insane opportunity for me. Let's go give it a shot. And Lisa, my wife, moved to Wisconsin sight unseen. She had never gone to visit or look for the apartment or everything. I had only been for 3 days to look for the apartment, and we just did it. And, it was nuts.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, it was nuts.
A life-changing move professionally, but also personally, no doubt.
100%.
the opportunity, so you were effectively running April Base, which is Justin's studio. Is that correct? You were doing that as well as obviously working with Justin. So how would you balance that? What's involved with running the studio, but also what was your immediate capacity with Justin? Was it being there to engineer sessions as he was working? How did that all work?
Yeah, so early on, it was basically like I was still working for the sound company, on paper, but I had moved to Wisconsin and was, saying no to other tours and other shows. And in my time off from Bon Iver tours was just at the studio all the time. Now, when I got there, the studio, big quotes, was, like a dining room table or a desk or something in the basement of this house Justin and his brother had bought. And there were a pair of 1073s and an LA2A and, a Mac Pro and a Pro Tools rig basically. And they had their cool little live room, which used to be the indoor pool in this basement. And, they had some mics and whatever, and a little tie panel in this live room. And it was just like, oh, this, okay.
It's like a home recording setup.
This is not a studio, but so that was a kind of a wild awakening. I hadn't seen it the first time I had seen it. Maybe I'd seen it in a promo video or something, but seeing it in person, I was just like, oh, this is like, I have this much gear, myself. But that's where they made the second record. So like, who am I to, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I guess. So that was a little shocking, but what Justin said is just, I want this place to be a real studio, and here's the keys. We've got the cash at the moment because we're doing great. So let's go nuts. And he really let me just go for it. And not that I was just like blowing money left and right or anything, but we did. We turned that place into a pretty cool studio for a minute. And in that time period, Justin just coming off and making the second record was not doing a lot of recording. It was all focused on tour. We toured a lot. I think we did 120 or 50 shows or something on that album cycle, which Justin and I agree in retrospect was way too many, but you got to do it, I guess, at some point. But so there wasn't a lot of actual music happening or recording happening. Then I look back on it, and in the time between when I started working and when we sort of started working on, when we knew we started working on 22 Million, which was the first record I did with them, we did crank out we did a Volcano Choir record, we did a Blind Boys of Alabama record, a Staves record, a Shouting Matches record. I think we did a Jason Feathers record. So we did like 5, 6, 7 records and some singles or whatever in this period where I'm saying, we weren't making any music, we weren't doing anything. So stuff was happening, but it was not like I would show up to the studio every morning and Justin and I would work on music for 8 hours.
Right.
A lot of the days, would be us goofing around and hooking up new gear or deciding where stuff goes, moving stuff around and deciding what we wanted the place to be. A lot of, talking and figuring it and each other out and like how this is all going to work. And is it going to work,
Yeah. Sounds incredibly fun. The the credits to 22 A Million are really interesting and have been commented on quite a lot. And there's the fact that Justin is credited as being maker and you are credited as being maker's maker. Yeah. What does that mean?
I don't know. It's it wasn't up to me. I like it on paper, but it does make, credit searching through some credits kind of goofy. It's like, well, who was on that record? And it's just nobody. I think the only person that has a real credit is Zach Hansen. I think he's like professional mixer or something.
Right.
The rest of us that worked on it were just like, I think BJ Burton's credit is Noble Black Eagle. And it's just like, well, what the hell do I do with that, man? I don't think they hand out awards for that one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's what Justin decided, and it looked good on the thing, and it's fun. But I mean, maybe that's a testament to the role-lessness that we kind of all have in the camp or something. But
sure,
I don't know.
The creative process for that album sounds incredibly interesting, and it was quite drawn out. I think it was around about 2 to 3 years that it took for that album to actually come to fruition. How would you describe the creative process of making 22 A Million?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. It was my first record with them, and my first record of that scale. Period. With anyone, and it was primarily Justin BJ Burton and myself working on that for that whole time. And it was crazy. You know, we just, like I said, we didn't really know we were making it until we were in the middle of it, sort of. But there were like lots of wild jam sessions, lots of people over to the studio, and we would just set up a ton of stuff and, you know, track for 2 hours, and just everybody would do stuff. And then we would sift through it. BJ has an incredible talent for that, of seemingly making something out of nothing. So he was a clutch member to deal with all of that content. A lot of, you know, for me, I was more on the engineering side rather than the production-y side, I think, for a lot of that stuff. Until we got further into the record is when I, you know, kind of joined that part as well. But yeah, you know, it was crazy. There was just a lot of people involved for a long time, and it took so long, or was over such a long period of time. Like I said, we just didn't even realize it was happening, or at least I didn't.
How do you, you mentioned BJ's role there, but how do people even stay focused? How do you, when you create that many ideas, where do you even start going, we're going to whittle these down into songs now? Because from what I understand, there were, as you just mentioned, there were lots of people coming around, and you would track for 2 hours, and so you might have a section from that recording, and then a section from another recording, and a section from another recording, and someone would have to go, you know, I think that's going to work with that and that and that, and then we're going to do this to the sound manipulation.
Yeah.
How do you stay focused during that? How do you not just completely lose track of everything?
I think we just try to follow whatever is exciting to us at the moment. That's what keeps the focus up. I mean, there is a time for focus, and that's generally like in the mornings for us after these kinds of sessions, or when we do a lot of tracking work. The mornings are the focus time. It'll be like coffee and comp and coffee and edit, and we'll all just kind of, and that can be like, you know, depending on who's working on the record at the time, whether it's me and BJ and Justin, or Brad Cook and you know, that whole team, or Zach Hansen or whoever, it'll just kind of be like, oh, I heard something, I'm going to go in there and mess around with it for a minute, or I'll do some editing in the morning. And there's just kind of that rotation, and I think that helps keep the focus up, because we're generally a little squad that can kind of relieve the other when necessary. There's not one person that's like, you know, taking notes on what take was good, and then also having to have the idea about how to make it all work. That definitely helps.
But sonically, that record was such, I guess, a left turn from the first two Bon Iver albums. Was there, when you were creating that and when you were coming up with ideas for that, because I understand at one point there was this idea about wanting to make it sound like it had been recorded on a cassette, and someone had taken the tape out and written on it, or stepped on it and then put the tape back in, and that would lead to little dropouts, and that was all on purpose. Was there a sense of risk? Was that exciting? Was it concerning when you knew the record was going to be listened to by people? How did that work?
I mean, it wasn't concerning. It was, I don't know. It was just like, again, we just kind of follow what we're jazzed about at the moment, you know, and when we're doing it. What are we excited about right now? Let's go there. And we can decide later if we need to that it was stupid or sounds bad or whatever.
Okay.
There wasn't a ton of conversation about it going in. You know, there was lots of conversation about how to manipulate sounds with the stuff we have, or like if we're searching for a sound, but there was never anything like it has to sound like this, or it would more be like, hey, I had this idea to put all these things together. And then we would do something with it for a little bit, and it would either be cool or not, or we would decide to use it on something else at some other point. So, you know, there wasn't some grand vision, but we just found ourselves getting excited about these same types of sounds all together. And again, BJ can be a really great driving force on like wild manipulation, and that is exciting. So he can conjure those kinds of things up. I tend to find things that are more melodically exciting or something to Justin. So there's just, again, it's just roles. You just kind of fall into your roles, and, you know, it's fun to mess with stuff. That's kind of a lot of what our days are, you know, goofing around with whatever we have in front of us.
And you actually famously created the Messina which this tool called the Messina, which I'm sure you've spoken about a lot.
Here we go. Yeah, no, that's all
and you know, I don't want to get too technical because I won't understand it. And this is
it's not. Yeah, it's not as technical as you think, but yeah.
So what? Okay. So what basically encouraged you to create that? What is it, and is it something that you continue to use?
Yeah, that was fully Justin. That was Justin being like, here's what I want to do. Here are things that I know can sort of do it. Here is what I don't like about those things. This was the most direct sonic instruction that was received during that record. It was, I want to be able to do this thing. Can you figure it out?
What was it?
It was, he wanted to be able to play his voice and manipulate it in a way that he had heard other people do, but that still wasn't quite his. So obviously Imogen Heap has, a fantastic song that uses a similar technique that was very inspiring to us and certainly something we referenced as something.
What's that track?
Hide and Seek. Yep. You'll probably hear it and go, oh yeah, this one.
Right.
And, our friend Francis Starlight of Francis and the Lights, he was doing a similar thing using Antares Harmony Engine and like their MIDI input. And it was achieving a similar experience, but it didn't sound the same. And we just kept searching for the thing that sounded what he wanted. There wasn't a lot of direction in what he wanted it to sound like, but there was examples of what wasn't quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Still sonically impressive and sounded great for the people that were using them, but was not our thing. So we were just going through a lot of different options of what that could be. Is it more of a vocoder thing? But those tend to sound very robotic and are going to hide his voice, which is a pretty stupid thing to do with a voice like his.
Mm.
So I knew that there was a similar thing within an Eventide effects unit, and we basically paired that with a bunch of instances of auto-tune to create this like sort of mixture of sound. So like I've said before, it's not a box that I made or anything. It's a mixture of all of these things, which is again what we're very good at, is taking this and that and going, these are cool.
Mm.
So it was that combination of things. And then the interface was just a keyboard, but it allowed Justin is an interesting keyboard player, but he's not a very good keyboard player. And he's like, he can play in C, and that's kind of it. So we needed something that was going to be able to work with that, and it can kind of get crazy with transposing other things. And we're kind of transposing on the back end and auto. Anyways, we got this kind of thing working together after a few iterations of other things to try. And he sat down and I was like, hey, can you try this and see if it is cool? And he sat down and he played, like he went, and then the next thing that he played was the first line of 715 Creeks, which is on 22 Million.
Yeah.
And he played that song like almost all the way down, within minutes of getting this thing working. And we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, oh, so I think we figured it out.
There was, presumably you're a little bit more excited than that. That must have been such a moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was really, it was incredible. That's why we both were like, oh, we looked at it was like a literal look. He was playing it through the mains we had since built another studio. He was playing it through the mains, so it was just like loud and it was very like, there was a lot of low end information and it was just shaking. And yeah, we just knew immediately without being able to quantify why this was the thing or why it sounded any better or different than anyone else's. I guess better or different were not really the requirements of what we were looking for, but
sure.
We just knew that was it then.
Yeah. So everything you've told me about your upbringing and then working in the live field and then starting to work with Justin, sound manipulation is obviously something that you're very passionate about now and have been, I guess, displaying over the past couple of years. But throughout that journey, through the live sound work, was sound manipulation something that you were interested in that point, or was there something in particular that at some point tweaked you to that and that was a passion for you?
Well, it's all sound manipulation, isn't it? Whether you're in any type of sound reinforcement, live sound, recording studio, or, recorded music, whatever, even if you're trying to get like the purest recording, the purest jazz recording or whatever, classical recording, you're like still manipulating it in some way. So that's the whole deal, So even though a lot of my work when I was in the live sound industry, primarily touring, was more about the, like, I don't really know the correct word, not technical because it's all technical, but like the functional execution of a sound reinforcement system and a show at that scale, whether that's dealing with the wireless like I was, or, you know, integrating the consoles with the PA and flying the PA and all that stuff. It was much more focused on that. But throughout all of that, I was still able to mix bands while I was on these tours. I was mixing opening acts and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. So that was still what I was trying to do, even though I was kind of, my job was this other thing. So I still got to do it. It was never something that I like pivoted to.
Okay.
Now, when I end up in a scenario in the recording studio with someone like Justin and the rest of the Bon Iver guys that are just like, yeah, go nuts, like go as far that way as you want, and we'll deal with it later. Of course, it's going to like kick it up a notch. You know, oh no, there's no rules. Everything's in bounds. Great. Okay. Well, I'll spend the next month, you know, working on this thing that's at the end of the month sounds like crap, and everybody goes, yeah, it wasn't quite it. And you go, all right, sick, I'm going to do this next one. You know what I mean? So it was always in there, and it was something I would do, but you know, it when someone gives you the keys, like I said, it of course gets turned up.
Yeah. What an incredible opportunity. So what have you learned about creativity then over the past couple of years? Is it about having that freedom?
That's a huge part of it. Whether that, is that freedom to go nuts, or the freedom that we have in being so fortunate to have our own insane studio. That is incredible, both incredible and a burden, because you have this incredible space, this fantastic studio filled with everything you would ever want. And like, maybe you don't feel like working in there today, or maybe you've been in there for like a month and nothing's really come of it. And that's an interesting place to be.
What do you do in those situations? Because it was interesting. I saw, I think it was an Instagram post from Dan Wilson yesterday, singer-songwriter, producer Dan Wilson. And he was just basically saying, effectively, when you're in a position like that, just do something. Like even walking to the shops and getting a drink, that's something. Just do something.
Yep.
Is there, do you relate to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also, and this is something Justin and I have learned together, and we talk about quite frequently about how we would like our schedules to evolve and operate moving forward, and knowing when we're not having a great day or something. Not that it's like we're not making hits. It's just like, I don't want to be in here trying really hard to do something, because again, we're fortunate enough that we don't have to. There's not a label breathing down our neck or something to crank this out. We're not doing these co-writing sessions or something with people where the goal is to walk out of there with a song. We have a much different agenda and path to creating the art that, you know, again, not everybody has that opportunity, but since we do, we are figuring out how to navigate that. And, you know, maybe we don't need to be in the studio every day, and maybe we only need to go in 3 days a week or something. And maybe you don't need to be in the studio at all, and you can still work on music in your bedroom. And then we'll meet up when there's something a little more formed, and we can work on that rather than trying to go from zero within the studio. So yeah, that's definitely true. It's like, go do something, or just go do something else. Like I keep coming back to this. Just, we're so fortunate that we can just say, I don't want to do this anymore. Let's go play video games or whatever, you know, like
right.
It's true. And but that's, I don't know, that's all part of it, I guess. Right.
You must have other artists and studio professionals confide in you sometimes, going, how did you do this? Like, not how did you do this technically, but how did you get to that point in your career? Because that sounds like a really dream scenario, not having to go into writing rooms and come out with a hit.
Yeah.
Not having that pressure on you, just that really calculated idea of, we're going to write a song today and it's going to be this long and have this many bars before we get to the chorus, and it's going to be a hit. Do you ever have people saying, I wish I could do that? How did you get to that position?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I touched on it earlier, where I'm just saying I have this very non-traditional path through the industry that has been very good to me. But you know, that makes it a tough question to answer. I spoke at Ohio University's Music Industry Summit a couple weeks ago, and I was getting that question a lot from students of just like, well, do you think if I wanted to follow your footsteps that I should like go on, like get into live sound and then pivot to studio work? And I'm just like, absolutely not. Do not try and follow my path of working in the live sound industry, hoping that you're going to run into some band or artist that's going to see you coiling cable on the side of the stage and say, that guy, he's coming with me, which is fully what happened, to a degree, and has worked out insanely well. But I don't honestly know how to tell people how to get here, because I look back and I can tell you the moments and how it all happened chronologically, but I don't know why I was chosen to follow this path. You know what I mean? I don't know how I got here.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm just as stoked and trying to knock on wood all the time as the next person.
So what excites you about the future? Like what are you working on now, and what can you see in the future in terms of developments in your field that really excites you?
Well, we're building a new studio right now that we've been doing for, I don't know, 4 years or something, and it's finally almost done.
Where is that?
It's where April Base was. We basically tore April Base down in Wisconsin and built a whole new, better version. So Justin and I are super excited about getting in there to start figuring the space out and how we're going to work in there, which is going to be a long process of getting comfortable in there and finding out what its strengths are and how to best utilize the whole thing. And so that's going to be a big part of the next chapter, figuring that out. I also tour a lot less now. I am not part of the daily touring situation with Bon Iver. I do rehearsals and I kind of go out and start the tour for the first couple shows, and then I kind of pop back in just to check in and see how everybody's feeling, how everything's going. And that's a big shift for me, not being there daily. But I really enjoy that. It's a sort of new, like, I don't know, I'm not a music director because they're all better musicians than me. And I'm like a creative technical director or something, or, I really enjoy that.
What does that mean?
I don't know either. But it's the kind of thing where I can, like, I stand at front of house, and I have a great relationship with our front of house engineer, Sandy Weitzel, and he and I can talk at length about what this song that we're playing live should sound like, and how can we achieve that, and let's try this thing. And I'm doing that. And then I talked to our lighting designer, Michael Brown, who's incredible, and we brainstorm about, well, what should the next show look like? Like, what if we did something like this? And he takes whatever I say and listens to me, or doesn't, but it's still like a conversation we get to have. And then I'm talking to our backline guys about new stuff that the band wants to try, and our effects engineer and our monitor engineer, and just then I'm dealing with the band and talking to them. Oh, you should maybe try this cymbal, or try this snare, or maybe we try this other guitar on this, or layout here, that kind of thing. I'm just kind of this like person that's, I guess, like a producer, but for the live end of it now.
Yeah.
And I still, obviously work in the studio, but it's really cool. It's something that I've been doing almost the entire time that I've been working with the band, but it is, because I'm not having to wear as many other hats and I'm just getting to focus on this one now, it's become a lot more fun and really gratifying in that for some of these songs that we perform, I'm the first person to hear them besides Justin, and I get to take them all the way around from whatever room we were in the first time we heard it, all the way around the world, making sure that we're presenting it as we want to the people that are willing to come and see us.
Yeah.
So that's a really fun new thing that I'm doing and adjusting to. So that's exciting. That's exciting to me. That's specific to me, not so much the industry, but
sure. But it's so interesting. It's like you're part of the band without being on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when sometimes I would sing with the band, but I was still off stage. I was in the shadows.
Were you?
Oh yeah.
What was it? Just doubling Justin's vocals, or?
Yeah, that was there was a couple of tours where I did that in my little effects world. I had my own little microphone.
Okay.
Hidden.
Any desire to get back on stage actually as a performer?
No. I said I moved back to Cleveland, and I've got some old friends here that are some of my closest friends, and we used to play in bands together in high school and stuff, and now I'm like, you guys want to goof around? We'll see. Who knows? Maybe we're gonna crank out a hit record coming soon. Who knows? But no desire. I don't have a whole lot of desire to be an artist. I feel like I was kind of made to support them.
Nice. Chris, just before we finish up, Jaxsta is all about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people you'd give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I mentioned a lot of them actually on this, throughout. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Justin for getting me into this next phase of my career and trusting me with his music is incredible. All the way down to my third grade music teacher, Mrs. Monarchino, and Mr. Thompson, and Bob Stegmiller, who gave me my first sound company job. Tom Arco at Eighth Day, of course. He was Jack Bosnick at Eighth Day. A lot of my touring guys or touring people that we all came up together, Demetrius Moore, Steve Curtin, Jordan Collins, There's just a lot of these people that have, and obviously my family and my wife and daughter and all that, they're incredible, and allow me to do this at the level that I do it. But yeah, I mean, it's too long of a list of people that have enabled me to be where I am today. And I hope so, in 20 years, somebody will be talking to you saying, hey, this guy helped me out too.
Nice.
That'd be pretty good.
Nice one. Hey, Chris, that was so great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And that's it for another episode of Humans of Music. A big thanks to Chris for his time, and thank you for listening. If you have any feedback on the show or suggestions on who you'd like me to interview, or even if you just want to say hello, please drop me a line at humansofmusic@jaxsta.com. That's humansofmusic, one word, at Jaxsta, JAXSTA.com. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode, or even better, share it amongst your friends and rate and review it. And remember, next time you need to know who wrote a song, who produced a song, who engineered it, who played on it, who sang on it, who did anything on it, head to jaxsta.com for all your official music credit information. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.